I never meant for it to happen. That's what I kept telling myself. Over and over, like a mantra, like a desperate plea for absolution. But the truth is, most betrayals don't happen in an instant. They build up slowly, creeping in through the cracks you pretend not to see, taking root in the spaces between love and longing, between comfort and chaos. I loved Daniel. I still do. He was my husband, my safe place, the man who knew me better than anyone else. We had been together for 6 years, married for 3, and in all that time, he had never given me a reason to doubt him. He was kind, devoted, steady. And maybe that was the problem. I should have been happy. I should have felt lucky. But instead, I felt like I was drowning. It started as something small, harmless, even. A lingering glance with someone who wasn't my husband. A casual conversation that lasted longer than it should have. The thrill of attention, the kind I hadn't felt in years. And then there was him. Ethan. I met him at work. He was everything Daniel wasn't: reckless, intense, unpredictable. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he saw something hidden beneath the surface, something even I didn't fully understand. And I let him in. At first, it was just talking. Innocent. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because when I was with Ethan, I felt awake. Alive. Like I was breaking free from a life I had never realized was suffocating me. The first time I kissed him, it was in the dim light of my office, long after everyone else had gone home. His lips were warm, his hands firm against my waist, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than guilt or duty. I felt desire. I told myself it was a mistake. That it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Again and again. And now, standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, I barely recognized myself. I had become the villain in my own story. And I had no idea how to stop. Every time I came home to Daniel, guilt gnawed at me, but it never stopped me from finding my way back to Ethan. The stolen moments, the secret texts, the intoxicating thrill of being wanted, it was a fire I couldn't put out. Daniel would ask me how my day was, and I would lie. I would tell him I worked late, that I was tired, that I had too much on my mind. And he, trusting, loving Daniel, would believe me. But lies have a way of festering. And even if he didn't suspect me yet, the distance between us had grown. He held me at night, but I felt cold. He kissed me, but my mind was elsewhere. He told me he loved me, and I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own betrayal. I started to wonder if I even loved him anymore. If I had ever truly loved him, or if I had just loved the idea of him, the stability, the comfort. And Ethan, he wasn't just an escape anymore. He had become something else. Something dangerous. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. But I wasn't ready to stop. I had never considered myself a liar before. But now, deception flowed from my lips as easily as breathing. I told Daniel I had to stay late at work. That my boss needed me to finish up a last-minute project. That I was exhausted and just wanted to come home and sleep. He never questioned me. Never doubted. He would smile, kiss my forehead, and tell me not to overwork myself. And then I would walk out the door and straight into Ethan's arms. Tonight was no different. Ethan had booked a hotel room downtown, far from the places Daniel and I would ever go. I had barely stepped inside before he pulled me in, his hands tangled in my hair, his lips crashing against mine with an urgency that sent shivers down my spine. With Ethan, everything was raw, electric. Every touch was charged with a hunger I had never felt before. He made me feel reckless, like I was something more than just a wife trapped in routine. But even as my body melted against his, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings I refused to hear. How long can you keep this up? How long before Daniel finds out? I silenced the voice with Ethan's kisses. Afterwards, we lay tangled in the sheets, my head resting on his chest. The city lights flickered through the window, casting shadows across his face. You should leave him, Ethan murmured, tracing circles on my bare shoulder. I stiffened. We had never talked about the future before. Never acknowledged what we were doing outside of these stolen moments. I can't, I whispered, staring at the ceiling. It's not that simple. It is, he argued. You don't love him anymore. You love me. His words sent a pang through my chest. Did I love him? Or was this just another illusion, another lie I had started to believe? I need time, I said finally. Ethan sighed but didn't push. Instead, he kissed my forehead and pulled me closer. But as I lay in his arms, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. Because I knew, deep down, that time was running out. When I got home that night, the house was dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen light. I tiptoed inside, careful not to wake Daniel. But as I reached for a glass of water, his voice cut through the silence. Where were you? I froze. He was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My heart pounded. He had never waited up for me before. Never questioned my excuses. At work, I said quickly, forcing my voice to stay even. I told you I had to stay late. Daniel's eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I felt like he was really seeing me. Not as his wife. Not as the woman he trusted. But as someone he didn't quite recognize. A stranger. I forced myself to hold his gaze, to act like nothing was wrong. Because if Daniel ever found out the truth, I didn't know what he would do. And that terrified me. The days after that night felt different. Daniel wasn't the same. Or maybe he was, and I was just seeing him differently. Seeing the way his eyes lingered on me longer, the way his questions carried an edge they never had before. Are you happy? He asked one evening, seemingly out of nowhere. We were sitting on the couch, a movie playing in the background, but I wasn't really watching. The question startled me. Of course, I answered too quickly. He didn't look convinced. I feel like you've been distant, he said, his voice careful, measured. Like something's on your mind. Panic flared in my chest, but I forced a soft laugh. Work has been stressful. That's all. Daniel nodded, but the doubt in his eyes didn't fade. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized something terrifying. He didn't trust me anymore. I started being more careful. Deleted messages the second they arrived. Took different routes home in case Daniel decided to check where I had been. Spent less time with Ethan, no matter how much it hurt. But deception is like a drug. Once you start, it's hard to stop. The secrecy, the rush, it was intoxicating. And one night, I slipped. Ethan and I met in his car, parked in a quiet spot by the lake. The windows were fogged up, the scent of him lingering in the air as we sat in the afterglow of yet another stolen moment. I hate sneaking around, he muttered. I want more than this. I ran my fingers through his hair. I know. Then end it, he said, turning to face me. Leave him. I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't want to. It was that I didn't know how. Daniel didn't deserve this. He was a good man, and I had shattered the foundation of our marriage. But I had also built a life with him, one that couldn't just be abandoned like an old piece of clothing. Could I really just walk away? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Daniel. I stared at the screen, dread pooling in my stomach. He never called this late. I answered, forcing my voice to stay steady. Hey. Where are you? Still at work, I lied automatically. Silence. A long, heavy silence that sent ice through my veins. Then, his voice, calm, quiet. Too quiet. Are you sure about that? Panic surged through me. My breath caught in my throat. He knew. Somehow, someway, he knew. And I had no idea what was coming next. I felt my whole body go cold. The way Daniel said it, steady, too calm, it was worse than if he had screamed at me. My fingers tightened around the phone as I tried to keep my voice normal. Of course I am. Why would you ask that? He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end, slow and measured, like he was giving me a chance to come clean. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I'll see you at home, he finally said, and then the line went dead. I sat frozen, staring at the dark screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Ethan shifted beside me. What's wrong? I turned to him, my chest tightening. I think he knows. Ethan's face darkened. What do you mean? I don't know, I whispered. But I have to go. I grabbed my coat and climbed out of the car, my mind racing. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Daniel was just suspicious, not certain. If I played it right, I could still fix this. But the second I stepped through the front door, I knew I was wrong. Daniel was waiting in the living room, his phone in his hand. The room was dimly lit, the glow from the lamp casting sharp shadows across his face. He looked tired. But not just physically. It was deeper than that. You lied to me, he said simply. My stomach twisted. What? His eyes locked onto mine, and that's when I saw it, the hurt, the anger, but most of all, the quiet devastation of a man realizing his wife wasn't who he thought she was. You're not at work, he continued, lifting his phone. I called your office. They said you left hours ago. My mouth went dry. Think. Find a way out. I stopped to see a friend, I said quickly. I just needed to talk. Which friend? I hesitated for a second too long. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. You're really going to stand there and lie to my face? I swallowed hard. Daniel, Who is he? His voice cut through me like a blade. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because what could I say? That it was a mistake? That I never meant to hurt him? The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Daniel shook his head, exhaling sharply. You should have just told me the truth. And then he walked past me, grabbing his keys from the counter. Panic flared in my chest. Where are you going? Away from here, he muttered, yanking open the door. And then he was gone. Just like that. I stood there, my hands trembling, my mind reeling. I had prepared for anger. For shouting, accusations, maybe even threats. But I hadn't prepared for this. For the quiet, aching finality of watching my husband walk away. And for the terrifying thought that he wasn't just leaving the house. He might be leaving me for good. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in our empty bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of guilt, fear, and something else, something darker. The way Daniel had looked at me before he left, the quiet devastation in his voice, it was worse than if he had yelled, worse than if he had shattered a glass against the wall. It was the look of a man who had already made a decision. And I had no idea what it was. By morning, I still hadn't heard from him. No calls. No texts. Nothing. I wanted to believe he just needed time. That he was driving aimlessly, clearing his head, trying to process the betrayal. But deep down, I knew Daniel. He wasn't the type to run without a plan. And that terrified me. By noon, the silence became unbearable. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I texted. No response. Panic gnawed at my insides. Where was he? What was he thinking? I debated calling his friends, his family, anyone who might know where he was, but something held me back. Pride? Guilt? Or was it fear of what I might find out? Instead, I did the one thing I knew I shouldn't. I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. Hey, he said cautiously, like he could already sense something was wrong. He knows, I whispered. A heavy silence. Then, a quiet curse. What happened? I told him everything, the phone call, the confrontation, the way Daniel had looked at me before he walked out. Ethan sighed. He'll calm down. Give it time. I wanted to believe that. But something in my gut told me this wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. I need to see you, I said suddenly. A pause. Are you sure that's a good idea right now? I don't know. But I don't want to be alone. Ethan exhaled. All right. Come over. I grabbed my coat and left the house, my heart pounding the entire way. Ethan's apartment was small but familiar. Safe. I had spent too many nights here, wrapped in his arms, convincing myself that what we were doing wasn't as wrong as it felt. Now, though, it didn't feel safe at all. Ethan pulled me into a hug the second I walked in. You're shaking, he murmured. I don't know what to do, I admitted. He just left. He'll come back, Ethan said, rubbing my back. He loves you. I let out a bitter laugh. Does he? Because I don't think love survives something like this. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then, he pulled back, his hands on my shoulders. What if we just stop pretending? I frowned. What? What if this is it, he said, his eyes searching mine. You've been unhappy with him for a long time. Maybe this is how it ends. And maybe that's not a bad thing. The words settled in my chest like stones. Was that what I wanted? For my marriage to just be over? Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Ethan and I exchanged a look. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. Are you expecting someone? I asked. He shook his head. The knock came again. Louder this time. And then? Daniel's voice. Open the door. My breath caught in my throat. Daniel. I turned to Ethan, panic flashing in my eyes. He looked just as stunned as I felt. What do we do? I whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. Nothing. He can't just show up like this. Another knock. Harder. Then his voice, colder this time. I know you're in there. Open the damn door. My heart pounded so violently I thought I might be sick. This wasn't the man I knew, this wasn't my Daniel. Ethan stepped toward the door, but I grabbed his wrist. Wait, I pleaded. Ethan exhaled sharply but didn't move. Silence. For a second, I thought maybe Daniel had left. Maybe he had realized this wasn't worth it. And then... bang. The door shook as Daniel slammed his fist against it. Fine, he said, his voice eerily calm. I'll wait. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was something else. Something darker. Ethan pulled me toward the kitchen, away from the door. You don't have to talk to him, he whispered. Let him cool off. But I knew Daniel. He wasn't leaving. And I wasn't sure I wanted him to. I'll talk to him, I said, surprising even myself. Ethan's brows knitted together. Are you sure? No. But I nodded anyway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and walked to the door. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it and slowly pulled it open. Daniel stood there, his face unreadable. His eyes flicked past me, landing on Ethan standing behind me. And that's when I saw it, the shift. The flicker of something dangerous in his gaze. Of course, he muttered, almost to himself. It's you. Ethan stepped forward. Daniel, just leave. This isn't going to help anything. Daniel ignored him. He looked at me. Only at me. Tell me the truth, he said, his voice low. Were you ever going to stop? I swallowed hard. Don't lie to me, Anna. My lips parted, but I couldn't speak. Because the truth? I didn't know. Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. I should have seen it, he murmured. The late nights, the excuses. God, I was so blind. Daniel, please. But he wasn't listening. His gaze darkened, his voice turning almost calm. Do you love him? I froze. Ethan stiffened beside me. Daniel. Do you love him? He repeated, his jaw clenching. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I could lie. I could say no, tell him what he wanted to hear, try to fix the unfixable. Or I could tell the truth. And shatter what little remained. I met his eyes, my throat dry. And then, quietly, I whispered. I don't know. The silence that followed was worse than any shouting match could have been. Daniel's face didn't change. He just nodded, like he had been expecting it. Like this was the moment that sealed our fate. He stepped back, his voice eerily even. Then I guess I have my answer. I reached for him. Daniel, wait. But he was already turning away. Walking into the night. And this time, I knew. He wasn't coming back. The silence left in Daniel's wake was deafening. I stood in the doorway, my hand still outstretched as if I could pull him back, as if I could somehow fix this mess I had created. But he was gone, swallowed by the night, and I was left standing between the man I had betrayed and the man I had betrayed him for. Ethan shifted behind me, clearing his throat. Anna. I turned slowly, my heart a hollow weight in my chest. His face was unreadable, but I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. Do you regret it? He asked. The question hit me like a slap. Did I? I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that I had chosen him. But as I stood there, replaying the look in Daniel's eyes, the way his voice had cracked on his final words, I didn't know what I felt anymore. I don't know, I admitted. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Jesus, Anna. He turned away, pacing to the kitchen, gripping the counter like he needed it to steady himself. I didn't force you into this. You wanted this, remember? I flinched at the sharpness in his voice. I know. Do you? He spun back to me, his expression dark. Because right now, you look like you'd do anything to take it back. I swallowed, my throat tight. That's not fair. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Isn't it? Tears burned in my eyes. I didn't plan for this, Ethan. I didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy my marriage. But it happened. And I don't know how to fix it. Maybe you can't, he said simply. And that scared me more than anything. I sat down at the table, burying my face in my hands. I thought I loved you, I whispered. Silence stretched between us. Then, his voice, low and careful. Past tense? I looked up at him, my vision blurred with unshed tears. I don't know what's real anymore. Ethan sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Anna, if you don't want this, if you don't want me, then just say it. I opened my mouth. And then my phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the tension, making me jump. I fumbled for it, my hands trembling. When I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. Daniel. Ethan saw it too. His expression darkened. Are you going to answer that? I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the screen. And then, before I could decide, the ringing stopped. A second later, a message appeared. I clicked on it, my pulse hammering. 2 words. Check your email. A shiver ran down my spine. What is it? Ethan asked, his voice cautious. I ignored him, my fingers moving on autopilot as I opened my laptop. My inbox loaded slowly, every second stretching unbearably. And then, there it was, an email from Daniel. No subject. No greeting. Just an attachment. I clicked on it. The screen flickered. A video file. I hesitated. Something felt wrong. Anna? Ethan's voice was sharper now, more urgent. But I had already hit play. the video started. And then I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't breathe. Because there, on the screen, was me. With Ethan. Every kiss. Every touch. Every whispered betrayal. Recorded. Exposed. My body turned to ice. Daniel knew. He had known for a long time. And this wasn't just a confrontation. This was retribution. I couldn't move. My hands were ice cold, fingers frozen over the laptop's trackpad as the video played. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. Every frame, every moment, was a dagger straight into my chest. Ethan and I, caught in our stolen moments. The way his hands traced my skin. The way I had whispered his name. The betrayal etched into every kiss, every glance. Daniel had known. For how long? Weeks? Months? The thought made my stomach churn. My pulse thundered in my ears as I forced my eyes away from the screen. The room around me felt like it was closing in. Ethan loomed nearby, watching with tense, unreadable eyes. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. But I couldn't answer. Because in the next second, another message appeared. I hope it was worth it. Daniel's words sliced deeper than I thought possible. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone, as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Ethan cursed under his breath. "Anna, talk to me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw what I had been blind to before. This wasn't love. Maybe it never had been. Ethan had been an escape, a reckless choice made in the haze of my loneliness. But it hadn't been real. And now, because of that choice, I had lost everything. My marriage. My home. My dignity. My Daniel. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I took a shaky breath and stood. My legs felt weak, like they might give out beneath me. "I have to fix this," I whispered. Ethan scoffed. "Fix what?" "Anna, he's not going to forgive you. You saw that video. He's done." I shook my head. "I have to try." Ethan's expression twisted into something bitter. "And what about me?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." The truth hung heavy between us. I turned away before he could say anything else. My hands fumbled as I grabbed my coat, my mind racing. I had to find Daniel. I had to look him in the eye and tell him, what? That I was sorry? That I would do anything to take it back? Would it even matter? I didn't know. But I had to try. I ran out the door, into the cold night, my heart hammering in my chest. I had made my choice. Now, I had to face the consequences.